Part 1. The Cause. Divine Puppet. There are days when it is all I can do to not laugh uncontrollably at any and every person and occurrence that comes within my scope of perception. Although it seems like it would feel good to release and simply laugh, I can guess that most people wouldn't feel comfortable around me if I was laughing at a street lamp, a road sign, or a flowing river. I'm also fairly certain that people wouldn't like it as I laughed at their news of dead children and wars and famine. It would be really difficult on everyone if I did let go of my inhibition at those times and began laughing at the insurmountable stupidity of the world. I mean, who wants to deal with a laughing lunatic? And it's laughter that ain't based on something exterior. It's totally based on my feeling. I mean, imagine what it would feel like to watch all the people in Cleveland declare a day when they would do nothing other than throw talcum powder on each other. It would seem so absurd you would have to laugh, and that moment of the initial laughter times 1,000,000,000 is what it feels like to me on those days. He swallowed and shifted the grainy image of his head downward. Then, of course, there are those days when everything seems so incredibly sad that I want to cry constantly, not because of any specific provocation, but because it is something I can feel, and not just emulate like those actors and actresses that everyone else seems to enjoy on TV or in movies, but really feel. And it's the impermanent nature of things that seem so beautifully sad that makes me want to cry, to sob for how insignificant all the world is, or at least all of the world I know of. Imagine you know of the greatest book ever, and it's in a language that you don't know. So the one person in the world who still speaks that language reads it to you translated and then dies right before the book is burned and you are deported to a place where no one speaks your language. And for the rest of your days, you picture this perfect story without being able to share it with anyone. And the story keeps you going, but the joy of sharing it is lost. That's the kind of sadness. His face morphed from the manifestation of sorrow. Clark could see the subject intellectualize the moment to halt his emotion and was struck by how serene he now seemed. "We all have times of overwhelming emotion," Clark began, only to be interrupted by the frantic tone of the subject. "But it doesn't just feel like an emotion." His subject's face immediately displayed a frustrated anger. "I mean, it is less like a feeling from my body, triggered by the intense neurochemical reactions that disperse electricity through my body, giving me the internal sensation, and more like an overwhelming drive, like something has mounted the being I am and is leading me towards an end I cannot yet understand or dare say even fathom. And that isn't normal, right? I mean, not every person feels that way, and the folks who do feel that way don't ever really have the ability to articulate it in a manner that is, albeit very fast, through the sense of manic energy, this accurate. Right, Doc?" Clark slowly nodded once while taking a deep breath. He kept his eyes locked on the subject. "I am going to recommend an antipsychotic because your manic tendency seems a little much." "Thank you, Doc. Really. Anything to help me rest a little." "You're welcome, Stefan. And it is reassuring to see a person with your diagnosis take so well to the idea of being on medication," Clark said. "Anything to help with calming me, because I could keep myself calm if the incidents would stop." Clark shifted in his seat. The screen flickered as his image placed the pen on the table. With hands folded gently before him, he spoke clearly. "What incidents?" he said. "Those things that agitate me because they shouldn't happen, but they do." Stefan's voice was nervous, yet honest. "Like what?" the doctor asked. Like why the light bulbs in my room keep burning out. And I know you know I'm not using my hands to break them because I felt it when you turned on the camera. There was another flicker on the screen. Clark leaned closer to the screen. What do you mean you felt it? He watched his image ask. The emanations, Stefan said, gesturing around the room. We both know it is flowing in this room, but I can actually feel it like sandpaper being pulled just under my skin. He lifted his right hand, palm up. And when I think about it, and I know that it's crazy, I find that if I move slightly, I can adjust the flow of this harnessed energy, and he lowered his hand, palm down, and the lights in the room dimmed. Oh man, see? This can't be happening! The lights on the screen glowed bright, and one of the ceiling fixtures sparked. The doctor stood as the subject covered his head with his hands. There was an incomprehensible collision of their voices, culminated in a frightened cry from the subject, and then the static on screen caused by the malfunction of the camera. The gray and black chaotic light on the screen covered his face. Dr. Clark Kessel had worked with many patients suffering from various mental and emotional imbalances, but this was one case that always piqued his curiosity. 4 years earlier, in the wake of his divorce, Clark accepted a staff psychiatrist position at the failing health facility near Cleveland, Ohio. On his second day at Greenfield Center, one day after completing his orientation, he was assigned to the patient, Stefan Corgan. Stefan, in his early 20s, was admitted 2 weeks earlier of his own volition, complaining of visual hallucinations when he closed his eyes so vivid that he did not sleep more than 5 hours total in the 2 weeks prior. Dr. Nichols spoke with him at length and diagnosed him with a severe case of generalized anxiety disorder and prescribed fairly high doses of an antidepressant. Dr. Nichols monitored Stefan's behavior for 2 hours, but had to leave when he received a phone call that most of his home had been destroyed by a gas main leak that was ignited by his neighbor's habit of smoking after throwing out the trash. His neighbor's home was consumed in the fireball that destroyed the second floor of Nichols' home, more than half of his first floor, and utterly wrecked his basement. In his haste to get to the site of what had once been his home, he neglected to use his turn signal at a busy intersection, and his tiny, fuel-efficient car was sideswiped by a 20-year-old car with tonnage almost equivalent to a tank. Needless to say, Nichols was given a leave of absence, and Dr. Michaels, the head of the department, took his patients and began looking for a staff psychiatrist. During this time, the nurses and orderlies began reporting some odd incidents that either involved or were in the general vicinity of Stefan, who still would not sleep more than mere minutes every 12 hours. Lights began flickering in the halls along which he paced. Bulbs began burning out with greater frequency. Electric vacuum cleaners would overheat and cast sparks from the wall outlet. The various electric appliances in the kitchen area shut down and the telephones would ring without a call. Most of these occurrences were reported to Dr. Michaels, and he accepted that the facility was the victim of shoddy workmanship during the construction. He made it clear that he would try to find the funds to hire a repair crew and solve the electrical problems, and did such to quash the rumors that the hospital was haunted. One evening, while finishing his rounds and preparing to leave, he walked past the empty patient lounge room. Before he had passed the door, the television turned on. Walking into the room, He vocally requested the person in the room identify him or herself and found the room void of any person other than himself. The remote control was on the table. He picked it up and shut the screen off and returned the remote to the table. As he turned around, the screen came on again. He walked to the TV and shut it off manually. When he turned to walk away, the lights in the room dimmed. The TV came back on and switched channels rapidly. The lights in the room brightened, and the TV stopped at a channel on which there was a commercial with a narrator stating, "Ask your doctor," before all the lights and the TV shut off. "Dr. Michaels?" Michaels spun quickly toward the door to see Stefan standing there in loose-fitting jogging pants and a t-shirt. The lights in the room came back on. I think the antidepressants aren't working," Stefan said. Clearing his throat, Michaels walked to the door. "Well, Stefan, I have a new psychiatrist starting tomorrow, and he will see if we can find something to better suit you." He crossed the doorway, and the lights in the room went out. "Now you should really try to get some sleep," he began walking away. "I would try," Stefan said, calling Michael's attention back to him. "But when I close my eyes, I can see them." Michael stopped and turned around, wondering if he would need to call for a sedative. "Who do you see?" he asked. "Them. The emanations. The churning energies that swirl and bend reality in ways our eyes cannot perceive. I say them because there are many currents flowing, but to personify them is probably to be arrogant. They are more of an it than a who," Stefan said. "Can you see it now?" Michaels asked. "Only when I blink. My eyes can only receive external information within a specific set of parameters, like yours or anyone else. But when my eyes are closed, it is there." "Do these emanations say anything to you?" "Not directly, but I suppose if I attuned my attention enough, I could find the music in their workings." Stefan turned and began walking back down the hallway. "I hear them more when I have my eyes open." "But you can't see them then?" Michaels asked, his question causing Stefan to turn around. "I can't see them, but I know they are there." "Where?" "Here, there, everywhere." "Maybe only in your mind." "Definitely in my mind," Stefan said with a smile. "But in your mind, too." "Yet I do not see them." Stefan slumped his shoulders. "I know, and that leads me to think I deserve to be here. I don't want to be here, but I also don't want to see them, it, whatever. But those antidepressants aren't helping with the problem. I can still see them, but I'm not as worried by what I see. My mood is adjusted, so I'm not anxious about what I see, but I still see it." Michaels walked closer to Stefan. "We will help you get better. We will do everything we can to understand your ailment and help you find a way to be free of it." Stefan smiled gratefully. "It's like I'm looking out of a window and watching a violent rainstorm. And I can see all the rain and wind and lightning, and all I can do is give it a name like storm or emanations to help me understand it. But I know it is a jumble of many, many, many little parts and molecules and attributes that give form to the seemingly chaotic series that I call emanations or storm. and it is frightening without the meds. With these meds, it is simply maddening. And that's what you see when you close your eyes? That's what I feel with my eyes open. When I close my eyes, it is like I'm walking through the window into the storm itself. Stefan shuddered slightly and hugged his own torso. Michaels moved to place a hand on Stefan's shoulder, but was interrupted by his pager. "It's all right, Doc. I will be all right." Stefan turned and walked away. Michaels checked his pager to find no message. He thought nothing of it as he glanced at the morose figure of Stefan sauntering sadly down the hall and turning into his room. Michaels, however, thought more of it through the night, as his pager sounded multiple times during the early morning hours. Just as he was about to excuse the pages as being symptomatic of a malfunctioning device, a noise from his living room goaded him from his bed. He found his television on and flipping through the cable stations in what seemed like a random manner until he heard various announcers' voices in succession recommending that viewers ask your doctor before the media appliance sparked and smoked and shut itself off for the final time. The next day, with a nervous relief, Michaels shook the hand of Clark Kessel to welcome him as the new staff psychiatrist. Michaels let Clark settle in and become oriented with the department and did his best to push Stefan from his mind. Due to such a conscious effort of avoidance on the part of Michaels, there was no sign-off on the antidepressant meds for Stefan, so the next day when Clark had interviewed the patient, recording the session for his records, Stefan no longer had a strong hold over his emotional reaction to the emanations. Clark looks back on that videotape regularly because the case was one that always worried him. The patient responded well to the antipsychotic medication prescribed, sleeping upwards of 8 hours. He exhibited a healthy appetite and a calm, constructive method in recreational activities. He started exercising in his room in the mornings and, in a follow-up session, when asked about the emanations, he said, "I don't see them, I don't hear them, I don't feel them. It is as though my mind is as normal as a human mind should be again. I feel like myself." Michaels noted passively to himself how the electrical problems in the hospital ceased. Michaels also replaced the television in his home 2 days after the discharge of Stefan Corrigan. It was recommended that Stefan locate a psychologist for supplemental therapy sessions and a psychiatrist to continue with his medication.